sitting next to a woman who lost her daughter. Can you tell me if illegal criminals are removed from the country if we're safer?
And to suggest that I don't care about what happens in my community.
This is my
time. I go to work every day trying to protect my community.
You are going to answer my questions.
What began as a hearing on immigration enforcement quickly turned into a fiery confrontation. Congressman Jeff Van Drew repeatedly demanded simple yes or no answers from Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney Steve Descano about whether deporting criminal illegal immigrants makes American communities safer. But as Descano refused to give the direct answers Van Drew wanted, the exchange grew increasingly heated, ending with Van Drew accusing local prosecutors of failing to stop a violent offender before tragedy struck. Here's what happened.
Mr. Van Drew. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to bring us, I think the other side has brought us the bizarro world, and I want to bring us to the world of reality. First of all, I want to say to you, Ms. Minter, and I mean it, I know you hear crocodile tears from politicians, you hear how sorry, you hear how sad, you hear the condolences. None of that does it justice. There's no words I can ever say. I say this every time we have another victim's family here. I pray to God there's a day when this no longer happens and we don't have to have these hearings. But we are going to have them with the good leadership of our chairman of this committee because it needs to be talked about. And if it needs to be talked about over and over again, and good Americans like you are willing to be here because you love your children, because you loved her, and you're willing to stand up, I applaud you, because more than a condolence, more than any of that, is when somebody says that to you, say, change the policy. Don't let it happen to somebody else. It shouldn't happen to anybody. God help you. I don't know how you do it, but we are praying for you. Secondly, when I say I want to bring us out of bizarro world, I was thinking about all the empty, a lot of times people gather around the kitchen table. Stephanie Minter's chair, that chair at the table is empty tonight. Lake and Riley's chair is empty tonight. Rachel Morin's chair is empty tonight. Jocelyn Nugari's chair. They're all human beings. They're all human souls that had families that love them and they love their family. They're gone. And we got more than that. We could spend the whole time here reading lists of people who've been murdered and hurt and beaten and raped because of what's happened and these policies. They're human beings. And you know what the worst of it is? And not the most important part, but on top of all of it, we're paying for all this. Sanctuary states and sanctuary cities cost a fortune. State of New Jersey, where I am, they estimate, and this is not me, came out in publications, $7.3 billion, not million, billion dollars every year because of sanctuary policies. That's a lot of money for people who are really squeezed. And it's horrible, and it shouldn't happen. And also, I want to allude to the fact, people are worried about sometimes when ICE goes into where there's a church, where there's a department store, or there's a school. Nobody's really wants that. Do you know why that's happening? It's happening predominantly in blue states because their local law enforcement, state, county, and local in sanctuary states are not allowed to cooperate where normally they would turn somebody over to ICE and you wouldn't have to go through that process. If we all cooperated, worked together, and cared about the people we serve, we'd be in better shape. Mr. Descano, simple question. Are American communities safer when illegal immigrants who commit crimes are deported or when they remain in those communities? Are they safer when they're deported communities? Yes or no? Just yes or no?
Well, sir, that's not...
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Sir.
I'm asking the question.
And I'm trying to answer them.
No, you
because
are...
you asked me a question that's outside of my purview.
Jim Jordan down there asked you questions. You're a human being. You're sitting next to a woman who lost her daughter. Can you tell me if illegal criminals are removed from the country if we're safer?
And to suggest that I don't care about what happens in my community.
This is my time.
I go to work every day trying to protect my community.
You are going to answer my questions. You don't show any discipline. When I'm asked questions, I answer them. So you're not willing to answer that question. Okay. So I ask you this question. Let's talk about Abdul Jalal. Yes or no, would Stephanie Minter be alive today if he had been deported? And you know why he wasn't deported? Because then, quite frankly, the administration was not as aggressive, and if a country didn't want to accept these awful people that came from the country, we didn't know where to send them, and we held them and we detained them. Now we're finding places to send them so that this doesn't go on. That's the answer. That's why that happened. It's not a mystery. It's not something weird or unusual. They didn't know where the heck to put it. Now we just do it and we get it done. But nevertheless, would we be safer if he wasn't in the country then? Would we be safer, yes or no?
Sir,
yes or no, or to be safer if the man wasn't in the country? Damn it, answer my question.
Sir, I'm trying. You keep changing the question.
No, it's yes or no. There's a bad guy that murders people.
Certainly,
are we safer that he's not in the country?
If somebody is...
Nope, you can't answer the question. I'm sorry. I'll ask you this. Explain to the lady next to you. Abdul Jalal was charged in your county more than 40 times, not 4 times, 40 times. Your office dropped the charges in almost every single case. That's fact. We have it documented. We can look at it. Your own Fairfax County Police Department wrote your office, we have it, it's fact, May 2025, saying he had shown a, quote, blatant disregard for human life and was a danger to the community, and that if he wasn't detained and deported, he would seriously hurt someone or kill someone. The very man went out and then killed someone. Okay, so the question is, couldn't have we done better there?
Yeah, the gentleman's time has expired. We'll take that as a rhetorical question, and Mr. Nadler is recognized.
Oh, well.
One of the most emotional moments of the hearing came when Congressman Jeff Van Drew questioned Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney Steve Descano about immigration enforcement, sanctuary policies, and the consequences of declining to prosecute repeat offenders. Van Drew began by addressing the family of a crime victim seated in the hearing room. He offered his condolences, acknowledging that no words could undo their loss, but said the purpose of the hearing was to prevent similar tragedies from happening to other families. He argued that changing public policy, rather than simply expressing sympathy, was the only meaningful response to repeated acts of violence. He then broadened his remarks, referencing several victims whose names have become part of the national debate over immigration enforcement. Van Drew said every victim represented a family permanently changed by violent crime and argued that lawmakers had a responsibility to confront policies they believed contributed to those tragedies. The congressman also criticized sanctuary jurisdictions, arguing they impose significant financial costs on taxpayers while making cooperation between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities more difficult. According to Van Drew, if local agencies consistently worked with ICE, immigration arrests could occur in controlled settings instead of public places such as schools, churches, or businesses. Van Drew then turned directly to Commonwealth's Attorney Steve Descano with what he described as a simple question. He asked whether American communities are safer when undocumented immigrants who commit crimes are deported rather than allowed to remain in the country. Instead of answering with a direct yes or no, Descano responded that the question fell outside his responsibilities as a local prosecutor. Van Drew immediately interrupted, insisting the question required only a straightforward answer. As Descano attempted to explain his position, Van Drew repeatedly reclaimed his time, arguing that the witness was refusing to answer a basic public safety question. The exchange quickly became tense, with both men speaking over one another. Van Drew then shifted to a specific criminal case involving a man identified as Abdul Jalal. He asked whether one of the victims discussed during the hearing might still be alive if that individual had been deported before the fatal crime occurred. The congressman argued that previous federal immigration policies had allowed dangerous offenders to remain in the United States because officials struggled to return them to their countries of origin. He contrasted that with current policies, saying the government now has additional options for removing individuals who commit serious crimes. Again, Van Drew pressed Descano for a yes or no answer, asking whether communities would be safer if violent offenders were no longer in the country. Descano attempted to respond, but Van Drew repeatedly cut him off, insisting the question did not require a lengthy explanation. The confrontation reached its peak when Van Drew accused Descano's office of repeatedly declining to prosecute Abdul Jalal despite dozens of prior criminal charges. He claimed court records showed that many of those charges had been dismissed and cited statements he said came from Fairfax County Police warning that the suspect posed a serious danger to the community if he was not detained. Vandrew argued those warnings were ignored and that the suspect later committed a deadly crime. He questioned whether prosecutors and local officials could have acted differently to prevent the tragedy. Before Descano could fully respond, the chairman announced that Vandrew's time had expired and recognized the next member. The exchange underscored the sharp divide over immigration enforcement and criminal justice policy. Supporters of stricter immigration enforcement argue that removing undocumented immigrants who commit serious crimes is essential to protecting public safety. Critics of that approach contend that individual criminal cases should not be used to broadly characterize immigration policy and argue that prosecutors must follow the evidence and the law in each case. The hearing reflected the continuing national debate over how federal immigration enforcement, local prosecutorial discretion, and public safety should intersect.